Asking yourself why and questioning your beliefs, your mindset, your values, your decisions, and almost any part of life can be incredibly powerful, especially with your money. And when you start asking why you behave a certain way with money, why you value spending on something your spouse maybe doesn't care about, or why you want to save, you improve your ability to live life in alignment with your values, improve communication with your partner, and focus on the main things that truly matter to you and not what tradition, your family, or some random dudes on a podcast say that you should value.
Welcome to the Military Money Manual Podcast, where every episode is all about achieving financial independence in the military faster than before. We believe personal finance shouldn't be boring or intimidating. Building wealth can be simple, and financial freedom is the ultimate financial goal. Now, here's your hosts, Spencer and Jamie.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Military Money Manual Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Reese from MilitaryMoneyManual.com. Joined in person, live for us, not for you, but in person by my co-host, Jamie. Jamie, this is great.
Welcome back to Hawaii.
I'm so excited to be here. We're recording at the Hub co-working space in beautiful Waikiki, Honolulu, on the island of Oahu. And today we're talking about the question why, the most powerful question you can ask. Jamie, what started your interest in this? Where did this idea of asking why come from?
I've been working with a coach some. We also had a great episode with Daniel Kopp a while ago where he talked about money stories or stories we tell ourselves with money. So that financial therapy conversation, as well as a couple other things, have really kind of sparked my interest in how powerful questions like that really can make our lives a lot more rewarding, a lot better, and making sure that we truly understand what we're doing and we're not just doing it without thinking through things. So one of the ways that we can apply this very simply is like, well, why do I value this? So like, why would I fly to New Zealand to visit my good friend Spencer? Like, what about that is special to me? And so that might be something from your family of origin. It might be a friendship that's special to you, or like a lack of a friendship when you were younger, and now that's turned into something that you value and you're willing to spend money on. For me, another one I've talked about on the podcast before is, my family, we always ate out for lunch on Sunday after church. Like, why do I still feel the need to do that? Like, I don't know. We just did.
Yeah.
And so, one day my wife was like, hey, it's like kind of stressful leaving church, like rushing.
Yep.
Me and one of our kids gets angry. Like, why is that something that you think we should do? It's like, I don't know. And no one's ever asked me to ask why. I've never asked myself why. And so it's like, well, now we're spending 40, 50 plus bucks to feed the family in a stressful situation for something that maybe doesn't even serve me anymore. It's not even special.
There's so many things in life that we do on autopilot because we've never questioned it. And that was something that in the Daniel Kopp episode and the Money Scripts, that was episode number 82 that we talked about, where the money scripts are those unconscious, unexamined beliefs that you have around money. And I think the most important thing there is they're unexamined. So when we examine them, then we can stop being controlled by them. Or we can, maybe we examine them and we realize, these beliefs are still serving me and I want to keep doing it. But at least you took the time to examine them and to question, why am I doing this thing? Whether it's not saving or overspending, or maybe you're at a point in your savings journey, on your financial independence journey, where you're still saving a huge percentage of your paycheck and it's not giving you joy anymore. You're just grinding. You're just trying to reach financial independence as fast as possible, but you're not enjoying the journey.
Yeah, that intentional choice is important. Another one, I don't think I've told this story on here before, but when I took out my career starter loan as a cadet in ROTC before commissioning, I used part of that to buy a new car because I had this vision of that a commissioned officer needs a certain type of car.
Yes.
It needs to be a brand new car. It needs to look nice because as I drive around to important staff meetings or whatever, people need to know that I'm like a real adult now. Like, I don't know. But that's what I did when I was 20 or whatever. No one really encouraged me to question that belief or ask why. So there's a lot of interesting examples that our culture does. Some of it's perceived, some of it's real. So some other cultural examples are in my town, people value having a big fancy SUV. Like if you're a soccer mom, you drive a Suburban or an Escalade or something. And then there's a difference between a white SUV or a black SUV and like the type of parent that you are.
Yep.
In America, you have to have two cars, even if you live on base and don't really need to. And that may or may not be my situation right now since I bike to work. Like probably 4 out of 5 days I bike to work, but yet my car sits in the driveway anyway. Like, why do we have to have two cars if I don't actually need it? For the twice a month that I'm driving separately from my family, or the 2 times a year that we have visitors and we have to drive around. Is that better than renting a car for a week?
Off a Turo or something. That's the one car family thing was something that my wife kind of stumbled into, where she didn't really like driving that much in America when she lived here. And we had one car for most of our marriage. And at first we were kind of like, there was this unconscious idea of like, well, what will people think? Or like, what if she needs a car, right? And it's like, well, then most of the time you just take an Uber or you rent a car. There are solutions to the problem. And especially when you're young and you're just starting your military career, a car can be your largest expense. And it can be the thing that I see most military families, that's the thing that sets them back the most, is that they have too much car.
Yeah.
And so if you can control that huge area of spending, which for most families in America, the three big areas are housing, transportation costs, and food. Those are the three big things. Those are the things that move the needle. And for military families, usually housing is taken care of because you either have BAH or you live on base or you get OHA. And so housing is it's just already kind of taken care of in our mind. So really, for most military families, it's transportation that's probably your largest cost. And yeah, if you're buying too much car, you could really set yourself back in achieving whatever financial goals you have.
Yeah, there's a couple young enlisted airmen I've seen over the years that they come to their first base and they don't have a car yet, and they buy a bike, which is good, and they bike around for a little bit, and people tease them about it, and eventually they end up buying a car that they probably don't need because the bike was working fine.
Yeah.
So that kind of cultural pressure. Nowadays, you also see it with influencers on Instagram and travel, and maybe even some of the travel that we've talked about has given some cultural pressure that like, oh, I should be traveling. That's something an American adult does. I should be taking, first class trips. It was like, if you're broke, then no, like you probably shouldn't be right now. You can later, but just really intentional. The bottom line is intentionally evaluating all of these things. So you're not just falling into it because that's the culture does, and asking yourself the question of why do I care about this? Is this something that I actually care about, or is this just the culture that I live in right now?
Asking why around your money beliefs is also equally as important, and not just around like kind of the topics we've talked about already. And that can be as simple as like, I talk to people all the time and they're like, hey, how much should I be saving in my TSP? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what are your goals? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And so it's like, okay, well, like, let's work on that. Like, how long do you want to work for? And they've never thought about it, right? They've never thought that, well, I'll just work until I'm 65, I guess, because that's retirement age, right? It's like, yeah, if you want to, but you don't have to. Let me introduce this concept of financial independence, retiring early to you. And once people realize that, like, hey, if you have a 5% savings rate and it's growing in an investment at like 5% after inflation a year, you're going to have to work like 47, 50 years at a 5% savings rate before you're financially independent. But if you can start cranking up that percentage, it very quickly starts chipping away at the number of years that you have to work until you reach financial independence, to the point that if you're at a 50% savings rate and you're starting from zero today, you'll be financially independent in 17 years. And so I love that 50% savings rate as a goal number. Not necessarily, it's not attainable for every family, but it's perfect because it's, as long as you hear about financial independence, in the first, let's say 10 years of your military career, if you're going to do a full 20-year military career, you're probably not that, you're probably closer to financial independence than you think. And a lot of people, they don't realize that because they never talk about it. I mean, it gets back to that question of why. It's like, well, why are you working? Well, to feed my family. What else do you want to do with that money? Like, why else? Like, do you want to just work your entire life? And do you want to be doing the job that you're currently doing for the rest of your life? Or do you want to give yourself and your family options? And a lot of people don't even know that there are options out there.
A lot of that comes from their family too. They don't ask why they observed certain behaviors, or if that's something that they intend to still value, where maybe their single parent raised them with 3 jobs just to survive. Or maybe they came from an incredibly generous family where generosity was an important part of their faith or something. Maybe they experienced very positive behaviors or very negative behaviors and their family went through a season of bankruptcy or something like that. So all of these inform subconsciously, usually, the decisions that you make about money, you and your family make about money now as an adult in the military, where you may not even realize that this is impacting you, to where, if you take an example like a family that had went through a season of bankruptcy when you were a child and you experienced some of that stress and anxiety over that, probably impacting the way that you handle money, almost certainly is impacting the way that you handle money today, just to the same way as if one of your parents was like ultra frugal and never bought anything, never splurged on anything, never used money as a tool to make life easier or anything like that. All of these things from your family of origin are other ways that the decisions of your life might not be intentional if you're not careful, and you need to intentionally look at it.
Yeah, in my book, The Military Money Manual, I talked about how, like, when I was young, my dad actually, helped me open up a Roth IRA when I was like 16 or something, right? Like very young, put a lot of my, money that I earned working over the summer in there. And, I knew that I was supposed to save and invest, but I could never figure out, like, what's the point? Like, what's the number at which you can live off of your investments? And is it 100,000? Is it $1 million? Is it 2 million? Is it 5 million? And like all at the time, it was harder to find information about the 4% rule and 25x your investments or your expenses. And like all the Money magazine and like Fortune, it would always be like, 80% of your last year of income. And it's like, I'm a kid right now making like $5,000 a year. Like clearly I can't retire on like $4,000 of income a year. So then you project it out and you're like, I don't know, like what's my lifestyle again? So until you discover kind of the FIRE movement and you recognize like, it's both your expenses and your income, and it's just math. It's just a math equation. And once you have the 4% rule and you understand that 25x your expenses is a close enough approximation of how much money you need invested to live off of your investments, it gives you a finish line. But until you question, like, well, why am I doing this? And what's the point of saving and investing? A lot of people don't even get started, right? Because they honestly can't see that there is a finish line.
Yeah.
Because they might think, oh, well, it's great if I save $500 a month for the next 40 years. And in 40 years, I'll have $4 million, but $4 million will be worth nothing in 40 years. And it's like, well, no, it'll be worth something. And you'll be a lot happier with $4 million 40 years from now than $0 40 years from now.
People who's maybe saw their parents or their grandparents working till they were 70 or 75 just because they didn't know any different might not understand that there are other options, like you said. One more example before we move on to the next topic is travel sports. It's huge in America right now. And a lot of stuff I've been reading in some books recently and anecdotally from acquaintances or friends is there's this pressure that your kids have to be involved in this elite travel sports league, whether it's soccer, baseball, whatever. And then they work their way up through basically all of their childhood. All of their weekends are devoted, usually like 2 or 3 practices a week plus a game. It's like usually over $1,000 per league per season, sometimes 2 seasons a year. And so you're talking about like 6-year-old kids where you're spending over $1,000 on recreational sports for them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's boiling down to the fact that like I wasn't a professional athlete. And so I'm projecting like what didn't happen in my life on my kids.
Yes.
And the way that is happening and kind of taking over America, where like you have to give your kids every possible best shot to be a professional athlete or like professional dancer or professional singer or whatever it is, like insert whatever they're into.
Yeah.
And it usually comes at great cost, both financially and time. And a lot of it just boils down to people not asking why. Like, why do I care so much about this? That I'm willing to make travel soccer the anchor point of our family's calendar and budget to make sure that my 5-year-old like is on a cool team. So.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, a lot of times, especially when there's like much cheaper, Parks and Rec local teams, or I mean, whatever happened to just playing at school?
Like test to bunch out and see what the kid likes when they're younger.
Sure.
The book Range, I think you read that too, where it's talking about like people not being an expert early on and someone being like a really good pianist early is not normally how it works. Like, so I think someone like Michael Phelps was in the book and it's like he did a bunch of sports and then just in his mid-teen years decided he actually liked swimming or something like that. So there's a bunch of stories in that book about how being generalist is better than being an expert and stuff.
Just a quick note from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to the show.
Hey, Spencer, I got a cousin that just graduated from high school, and they're about to start basic training in a few months. Any ideas on a gift I should get him?
Yep, sure do, Jamie. The Military Money Manual, A Practical Guide to Financial Freedom, is a concise, easy to read, and practical guide to your military money. It's the book that I wish someone had handed me on my first day in the military. In the book, I explain the exact money tactics and investing strategies that can enable you to achieve financial independence while serving in the U.S. military. It's available on Amazon, Audible, and my website. It's hardcover, paperback, ebook, Kindle, and audiobook. You can get a special discount using promo code podcast on my website, shop.militarymoneymanual.com.
Okay, next question of why that, how it affects your financial situation. Why do I think blank about money? So why do I think that I need to have a certain amount saved? why does money matter to me is a really good starting point. It might be a feeling of safety or security that you observed your parents not experiencing if they were working really hard, always felt behind on paycheck to paycheck kind of life, or worse, you observed them fight about money or about credit card debt or things like that. Why does money matter to me is a really powerful question, especially if you're married or with a long-term partner. Like, these conversations with your spouse can be really enlightening to bring up, where one spouse might want a certain amount of emergency fund in cash and the other one doesn't feel safe or doesn't have a need to have that much money. So I've worked with some couples where one wants like $50,000 in cash, which is a very solid over 6-month emergency fund probably for most family. But when you unpack the, like, why is that feeling of safety tied to a full emergency fund? It very well may be that they had some kind of financial trauma in their childhood where they observed the pain, and they want to know that that's never going to happen to them. So it's worth it for them to just feel that safety and not have a little bit of the surplus invested.
Yeah.
And until you ask that, you never understand your partner's perspective fully.
Yeah. I mean, I work with couples as well, usually through my website at militarymoneymanual.com/mentor. And one of my first questions usually for couples is like, how often do you guys talk about money? Or like, do you have a money date, once a month, once a quarter? Because usually in most relationships, there's the person who has the spreadsheet, and then there's the person who doesn't want to look at the spreadsheet, right? Like my wife said the other day, it's almost unfathomable to her that the person who doesn't want to look at the spreadsheet doesn't care about money, right? They probably care about money. But really what they want to know is, are we going to be okay? Or how much can I spend?
Or they're overwhelmed with the complexity of
right.
it. That was my wife.
Yeah. And having those money conversations and having those whys. And I worked with a couple the other day where they had a $100,000 emergency fund.
Whoa.
And it was in a high yield savings account.
Cash.
All in cash. It was a high yield savings account, FDIC insured. So that's fine, and it's getting its 5% a year. But I was like, that is a lot of cash to have sitting there that's not invested for you in the stock market or in accordance with your asset allocation. He said, yeah, that's just the number that my wife is comfortable at. And I said, have you talked to her about that? And he said, no, not really. And I was like, okay, well, why don't you, like, that could be a great conversation. Like, how much emergency fund do we actually need? Because she might think, if you break it down, you're like, look, we could have $50,000 in there and that could cover our expenses for a year. And she might go, oh, okay, that's all I need. Just like, I just want to know that we'd be good for a year.
We're good.
Yeah. So I think having those why conversations and understanding that for some people it's, money represents freedom. For some people, money represents security. And for some people, money represents pain or disgust, a lot of shame around money. And the biggest mistake that you can make as a couple is to not talk about money.
Yeah. Keep that shame in the closet.
And even if you keep separate finances, it's difficult for me to see couples that have completely separate finances and don't work towards any common goal together. Yeah. It's remarkable if that relationship lasts very long.
Gonna work.
Yeah.
Spencer, here's another example. So last night I took my family of 5, to see Moana 2. It ended up being like $120 by the time I think the tickets were like $60. Yep. And then the snacks were like 48 or 50, something like that. I could like start to feel my chest like tighten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why am I feeling this way? Like, this is a special time.
Yep.
We're like lined up in our reclining leather chairs. The kids brought their blankets. We're like snuggling because it's kind of cold in there. We're sharing popcorn and sharing candy.
Are they excited?
They were super excited.
Yeah.
I didn't share this. I didn't even tell my wife this yet, but she won't listen to this anyway, so I'll have to tell her separately. But I could like feel this physiological like feeling of like, this is too expensive. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And it comes back to like family of origin stuff of like, we don't spend money on frivolous things. Yeah. A family value above our kitchen table, almost not really, but
we are, well, no, it's like we are frugal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? It's like, you're going to have to sneak your snacks in or like, we're not all going to the 7:00 show and we're on the matinee show.
We're waiting for it to come out.
Yeah,
we're not going to the movie theater. There are some things that like I'll spend $100 or $110 on stuff without thinking twice about it. Mm-hmm. Usually on Amazon or like at Best Buy or something. But when it comes to like a special time where my family's together, like snuggling up under the blankets under the movie, like $110 isn't worth it. Maybe when we were $118,000 in debt, it may not have been a smart choice then.
Right.
But now there's no reason for me to still have that reaction.
Yeah.
To spending $100 at the movie theater with my kids.
So what do you do with that?
So first I acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So now I'm like to the point where I like, instead of just internalizing it, it's like, I'm recognizing this.
Yep.
There's a thing called name it to tame it.
Yep.
So if you're feeling anxious or upset or this feeling, like if by identifying it, you almost like can stiff arm it just by saying like, this is what I'm feeling right now.
Right.
I'm not a psychologist or any kind of
Medical professional. But you play one on TV.
But I've had some people helping me along the way. And one of the things is like, when you're feeling upset or overwhelmed, just by saying I'm feeling overwhelmed is an incredibly powerful way to just like put that at ease.
Yeah.
So that's what I did just internally is like, I'm feeling anxious about spending so much on this.
Yep.
And then I was like, well, why am I spending it? It's like, this is probably from family of origin.
Yep.
And now it's something that I value is doing things together as a family.
Yep.
And then the whole way home, we're listening to Moana songs and at bedtime and we're talking about which was your favorite scene and which was your favorite song. And I like this song from Moana better than this song. And all those conversations we wouldn't have had I not been able to overcome that like feeling.
Yeah. That's
It's a little vulnerable. Sorry, but yeah.
No, I like that.
People probably think I'm crazy. There's a few out there that probably relate to that. I don't know.
I think a lot of people are going to relate to that. Just identifying that tightness in the chest and being like, maybe that's your, flight or fight response, right? You can just be like, thank you, amygdala, whatever part of your brain, sends out those hormones. But like, I'm okay, right? Like, you can take a deep breath and you can be like, no, like, it's okay. Like, I'm spending this money on my family. That is the higher value, not whatever the frugality that I learned when I was growing up. You can recognize like that fight or flight response is trying to protect you.
Yep.
And you're like, thank you. You're trying to protect me, but I got this. Like
I don't need that right now.
I don't need that right now. Yeah. And like you want that fight or flight response to kick in when you're in a stressful situation or you're in a situation where, you're not comfortable. And like, I think one of the best times is if you accidentally get like roped into one of those timeshare high stress sales pitches, like you need to be able to say, look, thank you like so much for your time, but we're not ready to commit to anything right now. And we're going to head off back to the pool because we wandered into this high pressure sales tactics seminar. And
I'm going to take my TGI Fridays gift card and run now because my body's telling me this is a bad idea.
How much was it? $50?
I think we got two $50 gift cards. Maybe it was like maybe $100 in gift cards and $100 in cash or something like that. I have a picture of it. I'll find it and see if I can.
We should put that put that on our Instagram. So
Spencer, last one of this. Why do I think blank about money is why do I think that money is bad or evil? A lot of people, especially in a relationship, one partner may have a completely different view of money. And some of these questions, like I said before, are really powerful to understand the other person's perspective. But some people may have grown up or been raised or been like very explicitly told that money is evil. People that save money are evil. People that make money are evil. If you have $1 million, you're evil. Like some people say those things to their kids. So they grow up thinking that I'll be evil if I save money. And that might be why your spouse is resistant to bumping up your savings to 10%.
Because they think that, one of the beliefs that you might have, and you can examine this and see if it's true, but nobody got rich in a clean way.
Or without screwing someone else over.
That's a belief that some parents have taught their kids. And if you don't examine that money script, right, and it can dictate your whole life and you don't even recognize like, well, why am I never saving? And maybe it's because you learned growing up that the wealthy only got wealthy because they screwed someone over or because they committed a crime or they did something that was nefarious.
Yep.
It also reminds me a lot of the Money Scripts episode like we talked about before. And if you're interested in exploring like your own money scripts, you can take the Klontz Money Script Inventory Revised. That's the KMSI-R. You can just Google that. You have to put your email address in, but you can unsubscribe from his mailing list. And you can take the KMSI in there. And it talks about the various money scripts. And it could be a really fun thing. Well, for us money nerds, it can be a fun thing to do with your partner. And just
it's a wild Friday night at Spencer's house.
Start to understand. What are your scripts? Like, are you money avoidant? Are you a money worshiper? Are you someone who like has most people have a complex relationship with money. Yeah. It's not simple. Another technique is start with fill in the blank, right? Money is blank. And just see like what pops into your head right away. Like for me, it'd probably be like freedom. Money is freedom. Money is security. Money is the ability to do good works in the world. But for some people, right, it might be immediately like money is dirty, money is bad, money is evil. And if you're on a money date with your spouse, have them fill in the blank, and maybe you think about it ahead of time too, and you fill in the blank, and it's just an interesting place to kind of start the conversation and discover if there's beliefs or scripts there that aren't serving you anymore. And you can start to ask those whys, and you might realize like, well, that's what I learned growing up. But you know what, now that I think about it, like my lived experience, that doesn't hold true anymore.
Yeah.
And you can let that go and adopt a new belief. There's a great book Derek Sivers just put out, Useful, Not True. And basically the whole idea is that like every thought and every belief you can adopt when it's useful, and you can recognize that it's not necessarily true, but you can adopt that belief and use it to your advantage. And so if you adopt the belief like, hey, money is good, or money allows me to do the things I want to do in the world, and then you start accumulating more money, and then you might realize that, oh, okay, that belief wasn't necessarily true, but it served me because I got out of debt, because I created the life that I wanted for my family, where we don't have food insecurity, where we have a roof over our head, where we can pay our bills, where we can take vacations, and where we can spend time together. And yes, we have other sources of stress in our life, but money isn't one of them.
Yeah. So we shared some examples of this, and now I want to transition to talking about a couple ways to move forward and to use this powerful asking why concept. How do you apply this to your relationship in your life, basically? So the first one we'll share is sharing your why with your partner or your close friend. We've kind of hinted at this, but it allows you to compromise, keep what matters to each of you funded when you're looking at your budget. And like, say if my wife really valued social gatherings, it wasn't special to me, I would nix it from the budget or reduce it entirely. But now that I know that it's important to her, then we can keep that funded in the line item. It also helps you understand their viewpoint and help them understand your viewpoint. When you share your priorities with each other, they can also remind you of those values when you get out of alignment. So it could be something like, hey, sweetie, you said that you value time with friends, and now you're not wanting to go to the concert because the tickets are too expensive. Has that value changed, or is another value just outweighing that? Or is another value more important right now to cause you to say no to this time with friends because of the ticket price? Those kind of conversations are really helpful for sharing your why with your partner or friend, is the first kind of practical tip here.
Yeah, we talked about a little bit earlier, Jamie, but the other one is, does this belief still serve me? Just asking that question, and maybe it does, and that's great. Then you can keep it. But if it doesn't, maybe you want to adopt a different belief, or the opposite belief, or a tangential belief. And you might say, look, that was a belief that worked for me when I was in debt. Frugality was a very important core belief. But now I'm at a stage in my life where it's more important to be generous with the people I love, the causes I love, and doing the things I love, and living life to the fullest. And I can put that frugality kind of on the shelf and say, thank you. You helped me get out of debt, and I'll be forever grateful for you. And if I need to pull you back down off the shelf, I can, right? Like, let's say the stock market takes an 80% dive, and you and you lose your job, and you're like, we got to cut back. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember how to do this. Like,
and it could be the opposite too. It could be frivolous spending, where that served you at a time in your life where maybe you were under your parents' roof and you had an allowance or whatever, right. And then you enlisted in the military. You left all that behind, and you're at your first base, and now you're only making $30,000 a year or something like that. And there may be a time where that might come back up in the future, right, if you're diligent with saving. But right now, that the shopping sprees, I get stress relief from going, the mall or shopping online might not serve you right now. So it can definitely go both ways.
Kind of the last technique is the 5 whys, and you might hear this in like root cause analysis, like if you're an engineer or you ever work with like any corporations that kind of adopt these models. But it's an iterative, interrogative technique used to explore cause and effect relationships with a particular problem. So you might say, it's basically like acting like a 2-year-old, right? Like what do 2-year-olds always say, like, why? And so you just keep asking that why until and the technique is 5 times, but it can be as many times as you want, until you drill down and you understand like, okay, this is the reason why I had that belief or I do that thing. And then you can examine and be like, is that still true? Does that hold true still? And if it does, okay, then the chain of causality matches. But if you can examine the core root cause of why you believe something or why you do something, then you can decide, do I still want to do this? Or is that not appropriate anymore and I need to move on to something else?
Yeah. One of the things I've realized recently that kind of came from asking why is I really enjoy comedy shows.
Oh, yeah.
And when I started digging into like, why is this so fun? Because sometimes the jokes are kind of crass and it's not normally stuff I would align with, or, it's like people you don't hear of, or it's a comedy show where there's 5 comedians on stage and only like 2 of them are funny.
Yeah.
But I always walk out of there like smiling. Right. And when I look at it, it's like, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
When people make you laugh.
Yes.
And so that's now something that in the last just few months, I've discovered this is prioritizing finding comedy shows. And we're going to one tomorrow night, actually. And is a lot of fun. And when you dig back, it was like I was a very serious teenager. I was very serious in college. I didn't have a lot of fun. Like I thought I was having fun, but like when I look back at what I was doing, I wasn't a fun person. And I was very serious. And I don't even know why my wife started dating me. But so I think there's like something in there when you dig into it. It's like, well, why do I do this? It's because I'm like getting a glimpse of a fun, maybe teenage years or college years that I didn't fully experience.
Yeah.
And so like somehow going to a comedy show and like laughing a lot give this insight that I feel like I missed out on in some ways.
Now you can prioritize that because you have the income and you have the means, and if you get pleasure out of it, get enjoyment out of it, then why not do it?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Well, I hope this discussion today about the most powerful question you can ask, why, has helped you and hopefully your partner or maybe some family members or friends just examine some of the values and decisions and beliefs that you may hold or you may execute on, especially around money. And we talked about some other topics other than money, but money is a great tool for clarifying what's actually important. Because if I want to know like what somebody values, the easiest thing to do is just say, show me your credit card statement and I'll show you what you value because you spend money on those things. You might say you value family. You might say you value friends. And if I look at your credit card statement and it's just streaming HBO movies and Whole Foods purchases, it's like, well, were you buying those for a party? No? Okay. You got to start spending on your values or you don't value them. We also talked about some other techniques that you can use for asking why. And if you got value out of the show, 5-star review on Spotify or Apple is the easiest way to say thanks. We'll catch you in the next episode of the Military Money Manual podcast.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
The views and opinions presented here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the DoD or its components. Reference to any commercial products or services does not constitute DoD endorsement of those products or services.